Welcome to the Way of the Disciple, designed to equip everyday people to walk in the way of Jesus and help others do the same. This training follows our discipleship process here at News Story: connect, imitate, and influence. Each week, we'll walk through a key part of that process with practical tools and teaching to show that discipling someone is possible and God can use you to play a part in growing God's kingdom, person by person, family by family, generation by generation. In the description below each weekly episode, you'll find the worksheets used in the class so that you can have the same tools in your hands. We're glad you're here. Let's step into the way of the disciple together. So last week we got started. So if everyone have their folder, Okay. So we're going to get rolling, but I want to start off with prayer, and then we'll get started with week 2. So let me pray real quick. God, just thank you for this time just to gather together and just for the life of our church. We want to see more and better followers of Jesus. And so today, help us become a better follower of Jesus and allow us to be able to see it as our responsibility to then help others be changed by you. So God, help us to trust you in all things, and we live for your glory. Amen. Okay, so like last week, we're going to get started here. And last week, we started by laying the foundation of like really what discipleship is and really why it's essential to the life of the church. And so if you guys have your books, you can start beginning. Let me get my mouse over there. And so we start off with this main definition of discipleship is intentionally entering into relationships to help people follow Jesus, be changed by Jesus, and join the mission of Jesus. So that's like the definition that we started with, is it intentionally entering into relationships to help people follow Jesus and join the mission of Jesus. And so part of our job in discipleship, it's not about finishing a book or checking a box. It's about forming a life with Jesus. And then we want to help others do the same. And so part of in this is we emphasize this discipleship isn't just a program, it's a relationship that you have with people. And so as we finished last week, there was 2 things that you guys saw. There was the building relational trust survey. That was just both those things, and the case studies. Those were just for take-home practice for you, maybe, and then maybe more like a self-check for yourself about how am I at actually building up trust. So those we're not necessarily going to go through, but each of these weeks I designed some kind of take-home activity for you. And there's like case studies to learn about spiritual assessment and stuff like that. So, does anyone remember Colossians chapter 1? That's the passage we looked at last week. And if you don't have it, I have it on the screens, and it should be in your workbooks as well. But we looked at Colossians chapter 1, and I think it's very helpful for the idea really to frame in discipleship for us, is that we proclaim Him, that is Christ, warning and teaching everyone with all wisdom so that we may present everyone mature in Christ. And Paul says this, I labor for this reason, striving with His strength that works powerfully in me. And so discipleship, what we're going to see and what we know to be true is it takes labor. It takes struggling. It takes love. It's not powered by us, but it's powered by God. And one of the questions we said last week is that you have influence, and the question is, how will you use it? And so we're on week 2 for the fill-ins today, and we focused last week on connect, the idea of trying to learning where someone is spiritually. But today we're going to help in the next step of the journey. Make sure everyone's there with me. We're going to start working towards helping someone be changed by Jesus and how we imitate His life. And so I started thinking through discipleship just as another Bible passage is Matthew chapter 13, which is interesting because if you think about discipleship, this is how Jesus says, I'm going to build my kingdom this way. You would expect it, like for a kingdom building would be like coming in, establishing like battles and dynasties and like great fortunes and all this works. But Jesus says, that's not how I'm going to establish my kingdom. And He uses this parable. He says this, the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that a man took and sowed in his field. It's the smallest of all the seeds, but when grown, it's taller than the garden plants and becomes a tree so that the birds of the sky come and nest in its branches. And so Jesus taught us to live in view of not of today, but of eternity. And so part of our responsibility is we proclaim Christ now to present people fully mature then. And so we've said this, that we believe here in our process that you grow when you imitate the life of Jesus. The question is how? And in our definition, we're trying to intentionally enter into relationships to help people follow Jesus, be changed by Jesus. Now, the question I have is, if we're trying to help people be changed by Jesus, what do we do in discipleship that fosters that change? Yeah, let's find out where we are. Yeah, so you're on week 2. So skip over to the case studies right here. Those are just like take-home exercises.
Okay.
Right here, it says week 2, imitate building core practices. There we go. Man, I was stalling on a lot of that. That was great. Okay, everyone there? Okay. Nope, too far.
There we go. Okay.
All right. Okay. All right. Here, we're going to restart. Just kidding, we're not going to restart. Everyone there? Everyone there with me?
Top of the page it says week 2.
Week 2, yeah. Imitate building core practices. And so where we just finished up there is imitate, be changed by Jesus. What do we do in discipleship that fosters that kind of change? Because the overall truth, this is what we know, that God is working, and we believe that. We started that last week, that God is unchanging God, and He's the one working in people's hearts. But how do we play a part in that? And if we want to help people imitate Jesus, we first need to be people that trust enough to walk with. But in this discipleship, the hard discipleship, it's not just about finishing a book, because we have studies for you guys. It's not just passing along information. It's about forming a life towards Jesus. And also, while we're doing that, we're aiming to build in others not just habits or a head knowledge of Jesus, but core practices for a life with Jesus. And so part of our instruction in discipleship is meant to help someone become a better follower of Jesus. Not just know about Him, but actually then follow Him. That should be the goal. If we're looking at Colossians chapter 1 of we proclaim Christ so that we can present them, there has to be a goal in mind in that. That we proclaim the truth of the gospel clearly, boldly, and biblically. We present a life that's being shaped by that truth. Now, as we get into this, there's, I think, 5 core practices really that we're trying to cultivate in this. Now, before we go on, what do you think the 5 practices we want to cultivate in our disciples? Prayer, great. That's the first one. Oh, actually, the Bible is the first one. Okay. All right. Listening is a good part of it. Yeah. So the Bible, we're learning to hear God's voice through that. Okay, what are some other core practices of a believer?
Serving.
Service, yeah.
Lead.
Huh? Okay. What are some core things? Like if you're talking about forming a life with Jesus, that you're trying to help someone follow Him, what are some practices you would want to implement in their life? Imitating? Hey, you've listened. Okay, sweet. What else?
Building community with people.
Yeah, community is another one. So we got Bible, we have prayer, we have community, those first 3. I think Shemesh said serve. Yeah, there we go, serving. Way to go, Shemesh. And I would say one of the last ones is generosity. So part of these 5 core practices that in our disciplees, that in our instruction, in our wanting to make them, we want them to follow Jesus and imitate the life of Jesus. We want to see some of these things take root in their lives. But here's this one thing I was thinking about when I was studying for this. These aren't just good Christian practices, but they're practices that form the heart of a disciple. Because we can look at these things, we think Bible is a fantastic thing. We think prayer is a fantastic thing. We think all 5 of these things are great things for them. But if we have the mindset these are just a checklist that they need to nail, that's not forming a heart. They're just doing practices with no heart toward God. And so the goal is in these 5 things is not perfection, but it's movement. That we're trying to go through this. And so these are some of the practices we're looking to cultivate. Now I'll ask a question one more time. How do we cultivate those?
According to the age of the group you're talking to.
Okay, according to, so kind of contextualizing. Yeah, me talking to you guys is a lot different than talking to Kids Story. Yeah.
Model it.
Modeling? Yeah, fantastic. So what do you mean by modeling, Dennis?
Show them what it looks like in your life, and is in your. You're not just teaching them something from you, showing them something from your life. How does this work?
Right. Yeah.
By the way, your children will probably be one of the first people who will notice if you're modeling these things or not. And they will point it out if you're lacking, so.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Nope, sorry.
Well, staying on that same line, we talk about how the core principle is the Bible, and this is me speaking personally, the gray-haired lady, is that when we don't carry our Bibles, when we come to church, and people don't see us carrying our Bibles, yeah, we can have it on our phone. They don't have the opportunity to go, what is that book? We talk about Tracy. Tracy's bringing her grandson here now because she said one day, oh my gosh, I got to go back and get my Bible. And her grandson said to her, or is it her nephew, said to her, what is a Bible? He had no idea what a Bible was. So if we as Christians aren't carrying the word with us to make it available and open up that conversation of what that book is that we carry, then how can we move on to any of the others? Yeah,
especially with when we assume things, we get things wrong a lot of the times. And so we assume people know what the Bible is, then they'll be like, oh, wait a minute. Like I'm realizing this with my own kids, like having to teach a 5-year-old things about God are hard. Like you're like, wait a minute, I have to take like 7 steps back. Be like, okay, how do I make this make sense to him? Okay, so we modeling, that's another thing. So how else do we cultivate these core truths?
You have to do it with patience and grace, like
Okay.
in the next line, because.
So you would describe that as what? Love?
Well,
Yeah.
well, just be patient with them, because they don't have that knowledge. A lot of people we come in contact with have never been in church.
Yeah.
And they don't know much about the Lord. And we have to be patient and not be judgmental
Yeah.
at the very beginning, or we're going to shut them off, and anything we say or do after that point is null and void.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, we'll talk about that here in a second, actually. So that's great. Okay. Well, there's 2 more things I'm looking for. 2 more things.
According to the age group.
Yeah, according to age group. Gentleness. Okay, here, I'll just help you guys out. Teaching, that's one aspect of it, right? So a part of, if we want to cultivate core practices in discipleship relationship, there has to be some kind of teaching involved. You guys mentioned it through modeling. Part of, like what Dennis was saying, part of us is letting people see what faith looks like in action through love, right? This is what Don was saying. He was saying, like, basically showing up with patience and showing up with kindness and grace, just like Jesus does for us. And then there's the 4th one. It's probably the thing that we don't want to do the most. And I would say this. It's through correction. And we're going to talk about that more actually next week. So we're going to focus on the first 3 in our time together today. But in this, I will just want to tell you this. You will not do this perfectly. You're going to stumble. You're going to say awkward things. And you're going to feel like you're not spiritual enough. And that's okay. Discipleship is a journey of intentionally entering into relationships with people, where we're trying to help them learn what it looks like to follow Jesus through our teaching, through our modeling, through our loving of them, and then also through correction. And so I just want to make it clear, like, one faithful conversation is a win in this. And so I want to go through each of these sections real quick, the first 3, and go through here. And I want to give us each a goal in this. And so in our teaching, I think a helpful goal is very simply make it make sense. Make it make sense. Because within our discipleship process, we have imitate, is where transformation begins to take root. And for someone to imitate Jesus, they first have to understand who he is, what he teaches, and how truth speaks into their actual life. Now, there's 3 things I have under here. If you were to make it make sense, what are the 3 things you're looking for? How would you go about making sense to somebody?
Simple. Good.
Okay?
Simplify it.
Simplify it. Okay?
Actually know what you're talking about.
Knowledge.
That's helpful. You know,
You said clarity.
clarity. So it's got to make sense. So I will say this. I'll say one of the first things, if you're talking about truth, you got to make it make sense biblically. Right? So that's what he was saying. John was. That if you're going to talk about a truth from the Bible, you have to make sure it makes sense to them biblically. Because you can say, you sound like you're about to say something, Sandra.
No,
Okay, all
I
right.
will.
You will, okay. So you could read a passage of Scripture and be like, get it, got it, good, let's move on. And then they're like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense to me. So you have to make it make sense biblically. But then you have to make it make sense personally.
Personally, that's what it's gonna, how it would benefit.
So the idea is like, how does this speak to what they're facing right now?
I had that happen with my 15-year-old granddaughter this week. How is this going to apply to her personally, and how is this going to benefit her?
So then, that's a good segue to the third one. Make it make sense practically. So what kind of change is as a result of this? So your job in discipleship, if you're trying to teach them a truth, is to make it make sense biblically, make it make sense personally to them, and then what should change as a result? So those are like the 3 things in here. And there's a passage of Scripture, I think, below in your workbooks here that I thought was helpful that I've never really read before, or maybe I have. But it's out of Nehemiah chapter 8, is that they read out of the book of the law of God, translating and giving the meaning. And what does it say? So that the people could understand what was read. So in our teaching, that's what we need to do. So in our discipleship relationships, if we're helping someone be changed by Jesus, in our teaching, we should help them understand what was actually being read. Because I don't know about you, I hate reading. If I'm being honest, I hate reading. And I could read 3 or 4 pages and have no idea what I read. And then I have to go back and then read it again. And then I just give up because I hate reading. And so part of this idea is we're helping someone in discipleship relationships understand what was being read. Because we could throw all these truths at them and give all these things to memorize, but what happens if it's just a head knowledge but not a heart thing? It doesn't mean anything to them. So our goal in our teaching is to make it make sense. Now, it's not just about learning, but it's about living this as well. Because we are proclaiming truth, but we're also helping shape lives. And so the question that we're going to do this is like, what are we actually doing in teaching? We're helping someone understand. And so if you're trying to help someone understand something, what are some things you may have to do in your teaching? You may have to
Show them.
slow down. You may have to ask questions or listen to their questions. You may have to restate the truth in words that maybe they understand. And then, like any good teacher, use stories or analogies. And so what I want to do for a minute is I want us to practice this together. Because we have these 5 core truths. Darling, can I borrow your book real quick? I'm learning as I'm going, okay? I'm modeling this to you guys. And so in your guys' book, if you turn over after the core practice of self-inventory, there's core truth exercises. And so what I want to do is I want you guys to actually do this for yourselves. You guys can partner up with someone at your table. But what I want us to do is I want us to actually take these core truths, these 5 ones we've already listed, prayer, Bible. I want us to focus on prayer for a second. And I want you to, there's a definition on the core truth. And so I think you flip the page over, prayers on that side. But I want you guys to simply do this. I want you guys to read the definition. I want you to break it down. So part of the breaking it down could be identify words or phrases that need clarification. But here's what I want you guys to focus on. Not for you, for someone who does not know Jesus, actually for someone who has just met Jesus. Let's say they've gone down forward, they say, hey, I want to give my life to Jesus, help me. And you have to communicate to them what prayer is. And so as you're working through this definition, you're going to break it down as if you're talking to someone who does not know Jesus very well. Then you have to restate the truth in your own words. And then you have to connect the dots and then provide a small step. And so all the directions are right there. And I want you guys to focus on the core truth of prayer. And I want you to work together right here.
Stop and think, but he's done teaching us.
What was challenging about this exercise outside of not knowing where to find it? Okay, so what would...
Wisey, my sons are all passing me up. They now know more of it.
Hey, that's the goal in discipleship, that they learn more than you do. Okay, so what do you guys like about this exercise?
It opens up what you need to do.
It opens up what you need to do, yeah?
Well, basically, it opens up conversation.
Yeah.
We would not be having that conversation if you hadn't have said.
So how does it open up conversation?
You make yourself do it.
Okay, that's good too. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. You make yourself do it.
Goal.
Do what?
A common goal.
It's a common goal. Now, what... Common challenge, because sometimes we can assume we know what words mean.
Yeah.
But so when you look at that definition, what happens with that this definition? You can be like, well, prayer is an honest, ongoing conversation with God. And then so we talk about aligning His will. For someone who maybe just gave their life to the Lord, what does that even mean?
Yes.
And so that opens you up to a conversation. Be like, okay, well, let's talk about what that actually looks like.
What am I supposed to do now?
And so it's like this idea of these core truths is if we take time and just break it down, you provide opportunities to be able to then see where they're at. And do what? Make it make sense to them biblically, personally, and practically. And so part of your guys' responsibility in discipleship is your role is to bring truth to life in a way that they can understand and live out. And so you guys can go back to your fill in the blanks now. But part of your homework later, if you choose to do so, is to go start working through the rest of those 5 core truths. Because they're very practical, easy ways to... You have questions, you can break it down, you can make it make sense to you and then to somebody else. But our role in discipleship is to bring truth to life so that they can understand and live out. Because if the goal was just memorization, then we memorize this and move on. But we want to see transformation. And transformation happens when truth moves from the head to the heart and then to the hands. So you can go back to where we just were. I'm jumping around, but that's like a homework assignment if you want to do homework. Yeah, we're back to fill in the blanks here. Okay, sorry, you won't go over one. Sorry, as you guys could tell, I did this what made sense in my head, and so I'm saying in practicality that it can make sense. I just jumped around a little bit, so
you're going to make this truth, you're going to convert in a way we understand and live that.
Yes, I'm trying to get there. Yeah. Okay, so here, just real quick, we just have a few minutes left. The next 2 are a lot simpler. And so we're going to go on to modeling. Now, if you had to define what modeling faith looks like, how would you define that? Just do it. Yeah. Okay.
As a dad, you know that.
As a dad, what are you trying to do? You're trying to show them the way.
You are.
That's the simple definition of show them what this looks like. Because, like I know my kids, they learn how by seeing what your faith looks like in action. That's
Point out your deficiencies too,
yeah.
do that to us.
And in discipleship, you're going to realize that, yes, because we have this built-up expectation that we have to be perfect, we have to be on it. But I've been discipling a guy for a while, and there's sometimes I'm like, oh, that didn't make sense, what I just said to you. And so I'm like, let me back up. But it's fun, and because we develop a good relationship with this. And so part of this I don't remember what our next point is. Oh, teaching them to obey. It's because in Matthew 28, he says, teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And so that's going to require us first to obey everything Jesus what commanded us, but then also show them what that actually looks like. And there's a quote that I read that I thought was very helpful. Well, shoot, where did it go? Hold on, guys. I got all jacked up here. Hold on. I thought it made sense. Here's modeling. Here we go. Not because you're perfect, but because you're present and willing to let them in. Why? Because you've intentionally entered into a relationship with them. That's the goal. That discipleship is not this 6-week thing and we're done. It's a lifelong goal of proclaiming truth to them to present them mature. And part of what we want to see here, if we want to see more and better followers of Jesus, it's going to require people stepping into this. Not because we're perfect, but because we're present and willing to help others grow.
Just be honest and open.
Oh, here's the quote. I found it now. I'm back in it.
You got it.
It says, your life should attract people to listen to you. Your teaching should then work for their transformation, and their transformed lives will then be living proof of what you taught, attracting others to listen to them. And that's life, truth, life. The part of in this, when we're teaching and modeling and loving, our lives to reflect this. I just thought that was a helpful quote. And then we'll end with,
Will you leave that up for just a minute?
yep, totally can.
It's not in the book.
It's got everyone says there's too many pages, all right? I was going to put not enough pages. I could do more. But then here's the third thing that we'll go through, and we'll end with this one, is the idea of our teaching, modeling, and now loving, is that you're essentially showing up for them. Because we've talked about teaching, making truth make sense. We talked about modeling, living truth out in front of them. But none of that sticks without love. Because ultimately with loving your person you're discipling, it's really the relational glue. It's what earns trust. It keeps the door open and creates the space where growth can happen. And so Jesus didn't just train his disciples. He loved them. He called them friends. He was patient with their failure. He was gracious in correction, and he was faithful in their relationship. And I will come down to this, but what makes everything else, teaching, correcting, and modeling, it's what makes everything else matter. That you're loving them helps your teaching. Your loving them helps the correction that we're going to talk about next week. Your loving them helps the modeling.
And they're going to listen.
Well, hopefully. People still have their choice.
Yeah,
But you're doing everything you can to love them well. Because why? We want to see them become a better follower of Jesus. We want them to be formed to look into his image. So there's a running out of time, but I have different passages of scriptures, and so Philippians 2:15, you could read it. Philippians 3:17, which is a great passage. Join in imitating me, brothers and sisters, and just as you have used us as a model, keep your eyes on those who live as we do. And that's why it's so important for not just the person you're discipling, but for just as a church. If we want to see more and better, we want to keep our eyes on those who live as we do. And then there's another Bible verse. This is another one that's great. 2 Timothy 3. You have, however, known all about my teaching, my way of life, my purpose, my faith, my patience, my love, my endurance and persecution, sufferings. What kind of things happened to me? Yet the Lord rescued me from all these. And Paul is saying that to Timothy. He says,
all else fails, you say, because I said so.
yeah, okay, yeah, because I said so, yeah, because you love them well. And here, I'll end with this last thing. No matter who you disciple, you want them to be a better follower of Jesus by growing in the knowledge of God and by learning to put that knowledge into practice. Because we can tend to focus on this first one, and then we can fail on the second one. And so part of our discipleship, and if we remember, discipleship is an others-oriented life. And so part of our helping people be changed by Jesus, what do we do in discipleship? We teach, we model, we love, and then we correct. And that's can be a very challenging thing and very humbling thing as well. But part of our desire in this is that you're prayerfully considering, Lord, who you're going to disciple. That God is, and we know this truth, that God is working in people's hearts. But we can't separate learning and living. If we want to see more and better followers of Jesus this year, it's going to take you playing your part in doing so. Because all of us have gifts, all of us have talents, and if you follow the Lord and you love Him faithfully, we want to help others do the same. And so I'll just keep going back to the heart of discipleship is an others-oriented life that labors in the power of God to proclaim Christ and present others mature in Christ. And so I hope you can take away today, even though we had some problems getting through some different things, but I hope you can see that discipling at its core level is not as hard as we make it out to be. You take a core truth, you break it down, you ask questions, and you make it make sense to them. I think that's pretty. You can do that. And so let me do this. Is Mike here? I'll hand it over to Mike to do prayer requests. And I just want you guys to know from the bottom of my heart, discipleship you can do. You just have to be willing to do so. But I hope in this way you're looking at teaching. We get scared about that. It's possible, and you can do it. So I'll hand it over to Mike and let him do some prayer requests and pray for you guys. And then I have to go get ready for Kids Story and learn to contextualize truth in a different way. So.